Hello there, this is Sohail Hasni, your host at Energypreneurs. Cheap solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles are changing the transport and energy sector as we know. I bring in guests to this podcast who will help you with their ideas to navigate this energy transition. Thank you for joining. Hi, Chloe. Good morning from Sydney.
Good evening from New York.
This is fantastic. The technology of today that we can do all of those for free.
Someone's paying for it, but I'm not, so that's okay.
Yeah, you don't pay the incremental one. It's a zero marginal cost, right?
Yeah, so I work at a firm called Ponderosa Ventures. We allocate to technologies in the climate space, specifically in the food, agriculture, and ocean tech fields. I'll talk a bit more about the technologies in a second. We've looked at 45 companies to date in our portfolio, all across food, agriculture, and ocean tech, across many different kinds of technologies, all over the world, from Singapore to the Middle East to Central and South America to mostly North America and Europe, given where our networks and deals coming from, but technically all over the world and across all kinds of technologies. So from everything from kind of hardware, so agricultural robotics, to sensor systems, to synthetic biology systems, all the way to B2B SaaS and software systems as well. In every part of the food supply chain, from automation and inputs on farms and fields, so novel agricultural chemistries and robotics, to supply chain solutions for solving emissions and scope 3 problems, all the way to pretty much everything but brand to consumer. We don't do anything kind of consumer brand focusing. We stop at the ingredients formulation stage. But that's where we operate, and we are primarily driven by a climate focus. So we look for an emissions reduction potential in every single technology we invest in, but we also think about other areas of impact such as biodiversity, land use, human health, justice, water. So we think when you're building technologies in the food system, you have to go beyond just emissions. There are so many more other factors that are important.
Okay, so you have a broad screening criteria how you select the project?
Yeah. So we take a typical venture approach. I think what's really interesting about the food agriculture system is that it's seen as a place which is really hard to drive venture level returns. But obviously I fundamentally disagree with that, because it's a more challenging system to operate in, because you have kind of oligopolies in both kind of agricultural chemicals and large food corporates who would be the buyers of technology and ultimately sometimes the acquirers of technology as well, which makes it a really hard place to look for venture level returns. But we screen companies in the same way that other venture investors do. So we look for a great team. We think it's really important that at the pre-seed and seed stage, teams have to be both individually resilient and capable, but as a team, again, incredibly resilient and capable. And we spend a lot of time in the diligence process asking them questions about how they manage stress, how they manage conflict between them, in the belief that it's completely normal to have conflict between teams, but how you manage it and how you stay together after that conflict is really important. So we spend a lot of time asking questions about that, but also believe that you need a team that has both the commercial and the technical capabilities to build a great product. And so we also look for that in the process. So we spend a lot of time on team. We also look at for big and large markets. So we think in many cases in the food and agriculture system, there are many kind of medium-sized markets, and we're looking for technologies that can go after a large and exciting market with a significant impact potential. So we screen the impact very early on. And then we also look for teams that are solving like a really big customer problem. Like we think that unless this is a burning issue for your customers, people aren't going to pay for it. We're like, that's great, but this isn't going to make the venture returns for us. So those are the things we mostly look for, which are not super different from other investors, but we think it's just in the context of food and agriculture, which are slightly trickier places to invest in.
So you're emphasizing the word team, I think, more than half a dozen times, right? Point here is just putting a bunch of people together doesn't make a team. What's the interdynamics and everything else? You're looking at that as well, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's a really complicated one because there are many ways to form teams in the early stages. A lot of the teams we see are from venture builders. So they would have joined a venture building program and they would have been put together as a technical founder and commercial co-founder, which is actually sometimes a great outcome. And it can lead to really strong teams, but they don't necessarily have the track record of being friends at university or however other teams meet. So it's sometimes challenging to get to conviction that they will survive the ups and downs of building a business and conflict and just the struggles of doing all those hard things. We spend a lot of time thinking about team, and we think it's probably one of the most important things we diligence early on.
Excellent. And then you, on the other side of it, so now that it's a brilliant team and everything, they got clear.
Yeah.
But you also have to look at what impact do they bring, right? So
Yeah.
how do you assess that? That also must have a sort of list of things that you look at beyond emission, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah. So we think about emissions and we think about versus whatever the status quo is, like how will emissions reduce by the use of this technology, which I think is very standard, and what other people look at. We think about other areas of impact such as biodiversity, land use, human health justice in a less quantitative way. And when we invest, we like validate the impacts in a qualitative way. So an example would be like if we're investing or looking at a company which is, I don't know, developing a novel aquaculture production system, what will the effects on local biodiversity and the environment? Is it a negative effect? And if it is a negative effect, we should think about that in our process. And we put that into our investment process. So it's not so much quantitative on kind of biodiversity and human health, land use and water, but it's like a more qualitative approach.
And you yourself have a large team. How big is the group?
That's the interesting thing, but we're a team of 3, so we're a very small team. I would say we all are very committed and work very hard and manage to get a lot done. There are bonuses of being a small team in this space because when you have to make decisions very quickly, there are only so many people, and we all sit in the same room all day, so you can get a lot done. It sounds like there should be more of us.
When I met you in Oxford, you were doing some seaweed and as an MBA project there. How did you move into sort of a venture fund?
Actually, I was lucky enough to work for a venture builder before doing my MBA at Oxford. And in that venture builder, we looked at mostly alternative protein companies and some kind of ag and crop science work, which when I then started my MBA, I was like, I need to spend like all of my energy staying in this space because this is the most fun I've ever had at work. And then I was also lucky enough for during my MBA to work for a venture fund based in Germany part-time. So I did a few hours a week part-time during the day, which had a very similar focus to what I do now. And then when I finished my MBA, I managed to move into the role I have now. So I leapfrogged through this and started my career in consulting and then realized that I just wanted to do something which was more aligned with my kind of academic background and what I really cared about, which is food system and climate and what I spent my time reading about when I wasn't at work. And I was like, I should spend my actual time doing this instead of reading about it not at work.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you have food agriculture system where you are really into details and then you move into ocean, right? Yeah. So what are you doing at the ocean at the sort of broad level? It's mostly ecosystem sort of stuff?
It's a really big mixture. I would say the ocean sector for us is much, much newer. I have more experience in kind of food and agriculture, and so do my colleagues. So we're all newer on the ocean side. And as a technology space, it's also much newer. There are just fewer companies operating in the ocean. I think that's actually because doing things in the ocean is like really hard. Like the salt water corrodes it and it's ships. It's just expensive and it's difficult. I think it's a really new space. So we are looking across the space and looking at opportunities in a really broad range of things. A few aquaculture technologies from both kind of health and feed options, like all kind of technologies in like vaccines and replacements for antibiotics and things like that. So like really potentially impactful things because as I'm sure aquaculture has a huge potential to provide a lot of sustainable protein if done well, but at the moment it's done very badly and causes a lot of ecological damage and lots of fish die and it's very sad. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. And then we also have a few technologies in the kind of, we have one in the coastal defense space, which again is really exciting and we think really important from a carbon perspective and a rising sea levels and climate change perspective. So yeah, it's a small portion of what we do so far, but I think it will grow as we learn and as the sector grows. So it's exciting. And from an impact perspective, hugely overlooked. So lots to do there. Ask me again in a year and maybe I'll have a better answer.
Actually, that's an area, I think I interviewed someone who was working on ocean energy in Western Australia almost more than 2 years back. It's like the ocean is progressing very slowly, but when it happens, impact will be huge. Sort of that's the message I got because you walk along the beach and you say, oh my God, there's so much energy. There may be a way to get this out because we use a tiny amount of energy relative to what's out there, but
Yeah.
somehow it has not been cracked. I think for every industry that goes towards the ocean, I think that's the situation, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. Where to start and still work in progress.
I think how to operate things in a way which is just less expensive. Like I was speaking to someone and they were like, oh, it's great. But you realize that sending out one vessel with a few divers on it costs tens of thousands of dollars a day. So you have to be really sure that you're going to do it before you send out a vessel versus walking into a forest or walking onto a farm. It's just so much harder to do things. So I think that's been one.
And so much unknown also once you go into the ocean, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you have to worry about the ecological impacts, and then there's permitting, and permitting takes years depending on which jurisdiction you're in.
Yeah, and think you cannot zoom in and out on a map and see what's underneath, right?
If only. That's the next technology.
What else do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I moved to New York in March this year, which is very exciting, from London. And I think one of the realizations is that the corporate world in New York is fun, but quite intense. And so the way that everyone manages that is that everyone runs across New York. So there's a huge culture of running here. So I have, in classic style, also taken running and spent a lot of my time doing that to blow off steam. So that's not a fun thing to do, but I do a lot of that. And then I'm hoping maybe when the weather is better to take up painting again. I did a lot of painting in previous years and I just haven't. It's been too hard with moving house, and I don't actually have enough space in my apartment to paint anything. So I'm going to have to resolve that problem as well, but maybe one day.
Wow. So what is the most exciting project now in hand? You must have a lot of exciting projects, right?
We have a lot of exciting projects. I'm not actually allowed to cherry pick and give any details on it, but I'll tell you about a theme we're really excited. I'll talk about that. So I think one of the interesting things about being climate and food system is that you can't really fight the laws of physics. If you look at what is happening with climate change, people will need solutions for droughts and warming and decarbonizing their entire value chain. And I think that's entirely unavoidable. Regardless of your political beliefs, there has to be money going in that direction because people need to eat. So that's quite heartening to me. And so I've been spending a lot of time thinking about resilience and adaptation for climate change in the food system. Ignore decarbonization. Maybe we've solved green ammonia, great. Thinking about how to protect crops from drought, how to protect them from warming, how to make indoor agriculture more efficient, like all those beautiful plants behind you, like how can we grow things better and faster and cheaper? And how can we do it in a way which protects societies, particularly in the global south, but everywhere, because often what will be hardest hit will be those people who rely on tiny, thin margins and smallholder production systems. So that's what I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. I think I spend a lot of time talking to people building on-farm irrigation and automation systems, which is very exciting and cool. And so I'll be spending a lot more of my time thinking about that in the future. And what's interesting is that if you then talk to the would-be buyers of these technologies, like corporates, large farming cooperatives, they actually care about this, not because they're like, oh, climate change, what a nice thing to do, I should have some impact. They need to protect their margins. That's why they care about it. They need to like grow stuff and sell it. So it's quite nice because it's even more of an indication that we're not concessionary capital and we're not doing this for the impact. Obviously I am, but I think it's also the right thing to do from a returns perspective. So it lines up that. So yeah, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about resilience and droughts and other fun topics, but very important, hopefully, which you can see. If you look at cocoa and coffee prices for commodities over the last couple of years, they've gone through the roof. So someone needs to solve these problems. So,
but I thought also technology-wise, 2 years back during COVID, I did this small startup on hydroponics, and what I learned through the process, this whole area was full of
fun.
and not anymore, because I came to the conclusion like a solar power. The whole system was that we generate power in one place, distribute, transmit, and let people consume. And then that turned completely upside down, especially in Australia. People are generating enough at home, like in South Australia. Now there's enough on rooftops to meet the demand of the whole state. So that psyche has changed. But I think also the food production, somehow with the technology, as energy becomes cheap, almost zero marginal cost, maybe time is there already that there may be a white good in your house, like a big fridge. You open up and you have the track of your arugula, track of your lettuce, because the technology is there. So you need to bring those people to produce. And if we have sun or energy becomes cheap, then you can have lights everywhere, right? Could be a complete like a vertical big fridge with the lights on, and all you do is just open and tray, and AI can tell you what to do. So I'm hoping for that day that the agriculture somehow with technology will be turned a little bit upside down, like what solar power has done for the power industry, no?
Yeah, I think that's certainly the kind of overriding thesis in the last few years. Vertical farming's taken a hit. And I think part of that was the cost of energy going up in the last few years, more so in Central Europe than anywhere else. One of the other challenges, which is underappreciated, is that even if you can put a vertical farming solution in someone's home or even in a supermarket or in a coffee shop, people just don't always want to go there. People actually quite like going to the supermarket and just picking up. So I wonder if there's like an automation gap as well, whereas actually we can do it, but like how much of it can we get humans to do, and how much of it still has to be as easy as going to the supermarket and picking up some basil or picking up some or whatever.
Yeah, I think the main hurdle for people is from seed to seedling. That 1 week, nobody wants to take that stress. Nothing
tough,
happens. Too slow. So
Yeah.
that's why the business model that we are trying with that startup
Yeah.
at one stage is to supply people tray with
Kind of
like it's
seedlings.
how the chicken industry has done. There is a bunch of people who basically take the eggs and said
Yeah.
one day chicken, right? And then
Yeah.
they grow with this, so they don't have to wait 18 days to eggs to hatch. That's a different
Yeah.
industry, right? Source of your funding, how do you tap? Do you have few larger fund that lined up, or high net
So
worth
we are,
individual?
I think I'm not actually allowed to disclose that any better on the internet. I'm still not allowed to disclose that at all. Can't reference it. I will.
Fair enough. But I'm saying
Yeah.
that there are a lot of climate funds that are available, right? I was talking to Michelle, I think last year, right? They are helping companies to prepare to get access to a lot of public funds, right? So do we tap into some of those public funds as well?
I think companies in general, this is a really interesting dichotomy where there is actually a lot of capital available to companies who are seeking funding through grants and government opportunities and philanthropy and all these layers of funding. But I think there is still a gap in some sectors. And I think being in the EV space is hugely overfunded compared to many other sectors in climate. And I think that is where the gap really is. So like a lot of people can access EV funding, and energy is hugely well funded, but like for food and agriculture, which is seen as maybe doesn't have the same level of returns as energy or EVs, that it's really hard to access the right funding and supportive capital. And I would say a few years ago, there was a lot of more generalist VCs who were offering, you would have seen like all of the authentic protein companies who had a CPG brand were like raising big rounds. And now a lot of those generalist investors are pulling back from being in the kind of food and climate space, which is leaving a gap for funding, which actually I think we've seen a lot of corporate venture capital arms move into, and they have a strategic lens of, oh, we can help you if you can help us develop a cheaper alternative to cocoa or coffee or fats. There's like a huge opportunity from a strategic perspective. So I would say it's shifting very quickly, but actually a lot of government funding, more corporate venture capital arms, less generalist venture funding, and it's shifting that way. I would say there's not enough capital in the space, but there is relatively a lot.
Interesting, because you mentioned coffee so many times.
Yeah. Have you not seen the coffee? Like, it's crazy. Coffee commodities are going through the roof and really impactful on the environment. Like, coffee is, from an emissions perspective, very intense and very fragile. Climate change, you have to grow it in specific humidities and conditions, and it's just very fragile. Yeah, that's that. There are a lot of companies trying to solve the problem of coffee through either kind of lab grown or other ingredient alternatives, or developing climate resilient breeds and things like that. So there's lots going on in the coffee space. I'm not just addicted to coffee, but
because
I do like coffee.
I walked through sort of Sumatra jungles once, and then I was saying, I think that's the best coffee I ever had. Someone said, "Do you want a coffee?" And I was thinking, where from? And this person got offended, say, "This is Sumatra. This is where coffee is made." And they gave me just a fresh bean ground. Oh my God, that coffee was out of this world. So of course, these are very vulnerable to climate changes, right?
Yeah, I think it's tough. And I think one of the challenges that we've seen is that coffee and chocolate in particular are very vulnerable to climate change, very emissions intensive. And people have such an affinity for what they're meant to taste like that having a replica or an alternative just sometimes isn't good enough. And lots of companies have raised money on lab grown identical molecules. As many companies have also raised money on alternatives made of carrot and oat and other chemically altered things. I think it's going to be a tough space to really scale up at the way that like actual coffee is a huge scaled international commodity market. I have yet to see who's going to solve the problem, but many people are trying, so I'm very confident they will.
Yeah, and that market is growing, right?
It feels like more and more people are drinking coffee every year. Maybe some people are drinking less, but I'm sure people are drinking more coffee than they used to.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that conclusion very easy to take. Do you have a Chloe view of 2030, how things will change? Everybody tend to say 2030 means
Yeah.
far away. It's 5 years, 60 months.
I'll give you my hopeful view with the lens of how I hope the world will look if we solve the problems that we should. I think obviously over the next 5 years, we're going to see continued warming and kind of fragility of the food system. And I think a lot of the technologies that exist now are going to really scale very quickly just because they'll have to, in the same way that you saw during the COVID pandemic. Companies and industries reacted within days and weeks rather than years. And I think that's the same kind of urgency that we will see in 2030. So I think there'll be a lot of more automation, both on farm in supermarkets, getting things on plates, not because it's cheaper, but it will be cheaper because there will be a point where farm labor is so unpleasant that like nobody really wants to do it now. People will want to do it even less in 5 years. So I think there'll be a lot more automation. I hope there will be better alternatives to high emission meat and dairy products. So I think there'll be less industrialized protein production, which I think is both bad for the environment and also just generally quite sad from if you like a kind of chicken production and milk production and culture. There's a lot of unnecessary loss and pain through kind of both like disease and horrible conditions, which I think can be avoided again with technology. And I think actually people will also hopefully be healthier. I know that's a ridiculous thing to say, but I think for once, obesity trends in the US and in the UK, both children and adults, are reversing, which is nice. So I think a lot of it, hopefully like a progression towards more well-produced, healthy food and kind of a locally available vegetables will that as well. So that is absolutely what I hope the world will look like.
And to make that or bring that world around from where we are today, they need lots of human being like Chloe with lots of energy. But then also AI. What do you think? Do you use AI? What's your view?
Yeah, that's so interesting. We don't use AI at work in any of our processes because I think if I gave something to AI to do, a lot of me learning things and processing information is me writing it down. And so if I didn't do that, I would never do anything. I think a lot of technologies we lack are now starting to embed AI in their core technology offering, whether it's like finding better traits for plants. If we can use AI and machine learning to over time improve the yield of tomatoes, or a lot of companies we look at in the robotic space use AI and computer vision to over time improve the accuracy of what they're doing. So I think it will unquestionably become embedded in most new technologies that are developed because it's just a core baseline. It's table stakes for any technology developer building anything that has a software component. So I think as a fundamental tool for accelerating the speed of kind of industries and progress, I think we've seen some of that in kind of new molecule discovery and new trait variety discovery, but that's yet to be seen in any kind of real scale.
One area where I think, having spent so much time in the development space, one area where I think AI needs to come in a big way is management reporting, people asking questions. Right? You feed the system, people can ask whatever they want to ask rather than preparing reports. So with AI, I think if you just dump those data into a reservoir and you can question saying, can I have in this format? Can I have? So I think that will save a lot of time and
like
energy.
10% of any company's workforce.
Yes, AI is the only technology that's going to challenge the white collar worker, right? All the other technological development had been, oh, it's the blue collar workers who will be made efficient with the robotics. Now it's coming here, right? I think I'm halfway through. I'm about to put all my calendar items to an AI. You can check it out. I think it's called Motion. It just got launched a couple of months ago.
Like MOTION.
Yes, like it's really cool. If you give all your to-do list, priorities in life, and you do standard, I want to do it once a week, called my
Yeah.
farmer once a week, whatever you want to do. And then takes over, manages your calendar.
Oh,
And if you suddenly decide today I'm not doing anything, to block my day off, and it will
yeah.
automatically move the things to the next day based on the
Very
priority
nice.
that you have set up. So it looks amazing and scary at the same time. Is
How long
that
did it take you to set it? I would worry that I'd spend 2 days setting it up and then it wouldn't be very easy.
I think I've done 30% setup. It already taken me 2 days. No, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you
Yeah.
set it up. But then the scary part is, okay, yesterday I had something I deleted and instantly say, oh, you should do this call.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a secretary who's saying, okay, I looked at your calendar, I looked at it tomorrow
What about
night when I
this?
have time. Instantly done. So
Yeah, that's very funny. Maybe that's my next productivity saving device, I think.
yeah, what's coming is
Yeah.
quite mind-boggling, especially the 2030 that you have.
We believe we've got lots of delicious, healthy food to eat and everyone will be.
Yeah, but this definition of delicious, healthy is depending on who
Yes.
you ask.
Yeah, that is I think I'm not necessarily representative of the general population. But yeah.
Yes, that discussion is quite a complicated one, right?
Yeah.
And so we live in a very complicated world, right?
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to navigate around all of those things and hopefully find technologies that can weather any of those political changes. We'll
Yeah, I
see.
think a simple thing, like I put this one in. Do you know what's CGM? So that give you continuous glucose monitoring. I think I do from time to time. It's fun to know how your body
Yeah.
reacts. I think
Good.
that
Good.
sort of data once comes into the system, so people actually can see
Yeah.
the donut I had, I said, and the impact it had
Yeah.
on my body. So I think those technologies will change. So maybe some of the venture funds also needs to come in to collect data and inform people. I think that's a big public goods, no?
I think there is a role for a different organization to do.
Public goods, it has to come
Yeah.
from public funds, right? Better inform people with tech, because technology adoption is not, the digital divide is too much. Technology adoption is not uniform. No.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I think there's an interesting argument that's going to play out over the next few years about who owns data and how that data is stored and managed. And I think we've only just seen the beginning of that. We shall see, which will enable all of the AI we're talking about. But I think it's going to be a complex space. It already makes me nervous just thinking about it.
It is scary.
Yeah, you don't want anyone else to know how your body reacts to a donut on a glucose monitor.
But you need to know first, right?
I think it's an interesting one.
Because in future, your insurance, health insurance you pay could be easily tied to what you eat.
There are some companies operating like that already. Vitality in the UK, based upon your activity, it's connected to your Apple Watch, and the more steps you do, the whatever. I think you get some sort of like benefit. But there are lots of companies thinking about that. So
Yeah, because right now is your insurance premium based on, are you 25 to 30-year-old or 30
exactly,
to 35, right?
job, where do you live?
Yeah. So you could be 50-year-old but super healthy, then maybe a 35-year-old super unhealthy. The risk may be quite different than what it is if you put people into boxes, no?
Certainly. So I think it's going to be an interesting place. I think in Europe, there's so many data regulations that people are very nervous, but maybe in the US and the rest of the world, there's many more opportunities. Like in the UK and in Europe, you just got GDPR and you can't do anything about it. But maybe in other places we could take advantage of it. I don't know.
Yeah. Chloe, you work in an industry I don't know much about, so that's why I could not ask you something very specific. Is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting things going on. I think one of the things which I'm excited, like beyond, I talked a lot about climate adaptation and resilience, and why the food system is so exciting. I'm also really excited about, I mentioned that a few years ago, there was this kind of wave of alternative protein companies which had raised on really great valuations, developed a lot of technology, and now they're having a really tough time in the private markets and looking for capital, and some of them are not succeeding in doing so. I'm really excited for the moment that there's maybe a consolidation of all these amazing technologies that have been developed from cultivated meat and lab grown cheese and things like that. And I think there will be another wave of better food and better protein production, but I just don't know when that's going to happen. At the moment, we're still at the trough of the disillusionment for when the markets are not favoring those technologies. So I spent a lot of my time looking at kind of automation on farm and irrigation and inputs into agriculture, but I'm also thinking about alternatives to meat and things like that. And I think there's going to be a time and a space for that. I don't know when that is, but I'm keeping my eyes open for when that opportunity comes up again. I'm just a bit wary about that at the moment as well.
That interesting aspect there is when you mention artificially grown meat, people just say artificially grown.
There's a PR issue as well.
Yeah, I think that is a big issue. You walk into supermarket, all the things that are packaged, 90% of them are God knows what's in there, right? Ingredient list, right?
Yeah.
Because last week when I was coming to Sydney, I met someone on the plane, and this gentleman, he supplies in the perfume industry. And then I was saying, okay, what you do is, oh, we do soap, we do shampoos and other things. I said, that's interesting because there's so many organic flavor now, orange flavor, this flavor. He said, absolutely, but these are all chemicals. I said, what do you mean? Who is going to extract all of those? My team can produce any scent you want.
You don't need an orange to make something smell like oranges.
That's what he was saying, that for the average person, it's pure chemical, absolutely chemical, and chemical only. So coming back to the supermarket argument, you have difficulty selling artificial meat beyond burger because you said it's artificial. But there's so many other burger meat, God knows what's in there, right?
And I think to your point with on cosmetics and personal care goods, a lot of them have very less than optimal chemicals in them that people aren't aware of and they're just buying every day, but are very happy with. And I think now consumers are actually getting much better at identifying those chemicals, and there's a growing demand for sustainably derived ingredients into personal care. But it's a very small market at the moment. There's a few technologies trying to develop a better version of what you just described, but it's not there yet. So consumers are getting more aware, but conversely, people don't want fake meat and cheese and things. So I don't know where that'll land. Somewhere in the middle, perhaps, when people realize what's in all the other food they eat anyway. There's not actually that much difference. So.
Yeah, and I think also the consumer that you're talking about, living in New York or Sydney or this large developed cities, you do not have even access to those people like a bottom of the pyramid, the whole stack of people. I think that's where the challenge is, because the companies, that's where the information gap is, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you dump anything you want and people just say it looks nice.
Yeah, you're totally right. And it's much cheaper to chemically derive something that smells like orange than use orange. So that's why. Which is sad actually, but you're completely right.
So I think that's the scary part. That was one of my motivation to the podcast, saying, okay, making that knowledge accessible across the board. But it's still that misinformation and disinformation is scary. It will get worse day by day with AI, no?
Yeah. So you got to put out more podcasts to cut through the misinformation.
That's what I was trying to bring in individuals, so that, okay, if somebody says, oh, what Chloë says is interesting, let me look her up and send an email. Going forward, because very hard to go to the primary source.
Very hard. Yeah.
It's getting good.
Yeah, absolutely. More podcasts required with real humans. You can have AI generated podcasts now, so maybe that's the next step. That's the next step.
That's the scary part. So what else happening that you may want to share in your very exciting space?
Yeah, I think we're really excited about adaptation and resilience. And I'm personally very excited about the next wave of alternative protein food production. It's really easy to become bogged down by the news, the cycles of misinformation and terrible things happening. But I actually remain quite optimistic because I speak to people who are solving every single big problem every day. And they're like the smartest people in their field. These are geniuses. So I feel very privileged to be able to have that level of optimism and talk to really great people. So yeah, that's what I'm excited. Great people, great technology. A good 2030, hopefully.
Yes, I think I'm also quite excited in that sense, because I do have access to, predominantly through the podcast and other means, to talk to a lot of exciting people who are seeing the brighter side of the world. Things are moving and doing something interesting that when they go to bed at the night, say, hey, I did something different. And these are the exciting things I'm going to do tomorrow, despite what motion will put on my calendar. But people are very excited. So that's why information is also important, because I see let's take out the age dimension that we have, or the gender dimension. You will see in a general population, X% is excited about the world moving forward. It's almost like an adaptation curve. The half in the middle don't know what they're doing, and others half it's really down because they have been into the vicious circle of bad news. So
and it makes you
bring
not want to do
everyone.
anything if you think it's all bad. You have to remain optimistic. I'm just very lucky to talk to smart people solving problems all day.
So that may be the prescription. Talk to smart people every day, no?
Yeah, honestly, if you can find people smarter than you in every single topic, which is always the case for me, it's a real, and you can ask them questions and find out what they're excited about.
Yeah, I think I completely, that's a takeaway for people, saying, find a smart person
Specifically smart in something really cool, and then talk to them.
or somebody who's doing something exciting.
Ask them what they're excited about and become inspired and do the same.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Chloe, for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Energypreneurs. To continue listening to this conversation, please visit us at Energypreneurs. Thank you. See you next time.